My quail are really wound up, but the only private place I have at the moment is in my quail tent, which is just an easy up that I've put up around all these hutches to keep them dry. At least until I get the electric fence put up. But then, of course, uh, come wintertime, I'll probably have to put the tent back up because we have some really, really freezing cold days, like below sub-zero nights sometimes in the winter. And last winter when we did, and so I set up a wood stove. You can see where that little hole is. I had a little wood stove in here, and I fed that wood stove, and it brought the temperature in here from like 0 to like 10 degrees. But at least it was warmer than the outside temperature. Outside temperature got down to like minus 10, I think. So it kept it above that, so my birds had a fighting chance. Now I heard of someone in Toronto kept some quail on their porch. Like they had an apartment and they kept quail on the porch. And it was like minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And they did fine. They weathered it just fine. They were just sheltered from the wind is all they needed. So it could be that I'm just overprotective of my little babies. Now I want to talk about this saying. They say, always finish what you begin. Never quit halfway through. Never quit partway through. Always finish what you begin. And I think it's a bunch of bunk. Because the logical conclusion of that is if you're malinvesting, so basically you put money in, things crash, go keep going, in for a penny, in for a pound. But the project you're working on just might not be worth it. And likewise, if you're trying to like do something with your time, like learn a skill, now I'll give a perfect example. Years ago, this is in the late aughts, somewhere 2007, 2008, I ordered one of those Learn Locksmithing at Home programs. And it came with a manual, and it came with a key copying machine, a manual one, and it came with some locks, and it came with some lock picks. And I tried to learn the basics of locksmithing. It's interesting you call it smithing because you're actually not making locks. You're basically just picking them and repinning them. And I was horrible at it. In fact, I don't have the talent, I never did, for tinkering with things. Tinkering was not my thing. And I practiced as lockpicking, and I practiced, and I practiced, and I practiced, and I read the guide. I understood you have the tension wrench, and you have to feel around for the pins and not put too much pressure on the cylinder, and blah 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 blah. Either the lock popped as soon as I touched it, or generally I couldn't figure it out. I'd say 10% of the time, or it opened right away. Not 20. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. No matter how much I practice. I know 10,000 hours to master a trade. Yeah, but let's talk about there's a difference between competence and mastery. It only takes a few tens or a few dozen hours to get basic competence at just most things. And I couldn't even develop basic competence at lockpicking. And I tried repinning some locks, and just being a clumsy oaf, I ended up destroying the springs. And if you don't know the inside of locks, you can probably look it up. But basically, you have the pins and there's little springs that push the pins down. So when you put the key in, it pushes up on the pin, and until it's like a shearing line where you can turn the cylinder. And so I look at how many locks it broke, and I looked at how much different type of door hardware I had to learn how to use. And I thought about what would be the capital investment, not just to get samples of these things, but not fuck them up. And then factor in the fact that I suck at tinkering with mechanical things. So this doesn't work, and I quit. I stopped doing it. I kept the lock picks, and occasionally I would still like pick the lock on my apartment door just so I know I could. I've since lost my lock picks. I'm kind of annoyed about that. In any case, it was a waste of time. I threw $795 down the drain, and the fact I'm like, oh, you're in for that much, you might as well finish. No, I might as well not finish. I might as well cut my losses and just move on to something else. No, I didn't. I just kept working my regular fucking job. And in fact, quite a bit of my life has been a question of just choosing the wrong path. I did a video, I think you should watch, on the corruption of the pest control industry. So I worked for 3 years as an exterminator. And in my misery and frustration, I quit. Overworked, underpaid. And not to mention just all the immoral shit I either had to turn a blind eye to or participate in to keep to work in this job, and I wasn't going to do it anymore. I had so many grievances, And not just a question of changing employers. If I toughed it out for 2 more years, then I could take the supervisor's exam and then run my own company if I wanted to. The question is that what would be the cost morally, in terms of my sanity, in terms of my soul? Would have been huge. I know some people think that way. This is wrong, but you just do the evil for a little bit more, and then you could switch to something and do a more ethical, do more ethical program yourself. And like, no, I'm not doing that. And they may imagine, like, you might do more good in the end than evil once you're in charge. Like, yeah, even then, that's not a good excuse to do evil. I know that there are people in politics who like stay in it, or they stay in police work when they shouldn't or something, because they're hoping to do more good than bad while knowingly doing bad. And I consider that an unacceptable way of life. So I quit my job as an exterminator. And I remember having breakfast with a good friend of mine. And when I told him, yeah, I got another job, I'm working at this factory, he's like, you really need to pick one trade and stick with it. Yeah, but I was miserable. He's like, it doesn't matter. Just pick one trade and stick with it. He was very much a pragmatist. We thought differently. Now, we still loved each other, but we had fundamentally different views on it. It's like, just pick one trade, stick with it, tough it out. You need to have a career. You need a specialization. You need to be good at something. And that was the practical side of things. Absolutely. He was very much a pragmatist. His father was a pragmatist. In fact, his father and my father were really good friends. And his mother and my mother were good friends. And his sister and one of my sisters were good friends. And family was pretty close. So we learned to appreciate each other despite having major, differences of opinion at times. And I had another friend who got frustrated. Like, you never finish what you begin, ever. You always start things, you don't finish them. Like, well, I keep spending my time and money doing the wrong thing. So why would I want to follow through on something just to say I followed through? No, I understand the social technology behind always finish what you begin. It's kind of like my parents used to tell me, always do your best. The social technology is you don't fail for lack of trying. Now, if nature knocks you down, you get sick, you get a serious injury, if there's a war and you get wounded, whatever, or just some piece of good fortune makes your effort no longer needed, okay, then you can quit. Otherwise, you stick with it. But, well, that can be a good technology if you have a skill set, or at least an aptitude that is suited to what you're doing. It is not a good philosophy if you're not suited to it. Now, I understand people do things that they're not suited to. I mean, supposedly Einstein taught himself how to paint because he wanted to exercise a different part of his brain. Well, good for him if that's what he wants to do. If he gets off on that. He got off on that. Good for him. I don't. I think it's important to figure out what is an efficient use of your time and your sanity and your money and pursue those things. But if you find out you're on the wrong path, and not just because you had initial difficulty, but you're really like, oh yeah, this isn't working out. This is bad. This is wrong. Right? Like, okay, so I had worked in a warehouse for 13 years, but it was broken up briefly for a few months because I had given my notice and gone to a different warehouse that paid a lot more money. They said the potential to pay a lot more, but the physical labor was grueling and I couldn't make the production quota. I just couldn't do it. I wasn't fast enough. And part of it was due to the crappiness of the pick list. If you don't know anything about order picking in a warehouse, basically you want minimal travel time and maximum picks for your travel time. So you could go to, like, for example, 50 locations throughout a warehouse and pick 50 items, or you can go to 3 locations close together and pick 50 items. It's going to be faster to pick 50 items from 3 locations than through 50 locations, to put it simply. So we had a crap pick list, but physically just all that heavy lifting, way beyond what I was accustomed to. I was doing some degree of heavy lifting at the first warehouse, at the 13-year warehouse. The intensity and the frequency was much higher. And so when my old employer was going to rehire, I applied and got back. And I got reinstated at my old pay. And when I got back to my old employer, I had sciatic nerve pinch. I was injured from my job at the more intense warehouse. It was a mistake. It was a mistake from day one. And I knew it was a mistake from day one because we sat down for our orientation, and the first freaking video they showed us was why unions are bad. Beware of people looking for you to give your signature, because we'll never ask you to sign anything, ever. We'll never ask you to sign any kind of documents, but they will. And then, of course, right afterwards, there's a bunch of documents to sign as part of the onboarding process. The hypocrisy was just stinking from the very beginning. And yeah, I'm going to differ from most people in the online, I guess you might call the manosphere, for lack of a better term. I think unions are fine. I'm not saying all unions do good things. In fact, a lot of unions do some bad things. But the concept of collective bargaining, of organizing to advance your interests, that's a good thing. I have no problem with it. I'm super suspicious of any employer whose first video is not, hey, welcome to our company, this is what we're about, blah, 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 the usual bland bullshit, with the elevator music. Deal with that. The first video was not about that. It was about why unions are bad. And you know what kind of employer you're going to work for, what kind of bullshit you're going to deal with. And I dealt with all kinds of bullshit. There were a few people there who genuinely earned my affection. A department lead and one supervisor who I generally had affection for. And some of my coworkers I had affection for and respect for. But dealing with the higher levels of management, no way. There was flaming hot diarrhea bullshit, steaming, come out of their mouths at every major meeting. And I know that some of them did it out of a sense of like, well, what else am I going to do? I am at this position. This is what I'm supposed to do. I get it. I totally get it. Anyways, I'm not going to harp on that. And the point is, I made a mistake. It's not my job to stay there despite my growing injuries, despite the bullshit, despite the immorality, despite the frustration, despite the fact I was going to end up on disability collecting 60% of not very much, because it took 3 years there to get up to the really good wage. They had step increases for every year, which is good. I admire that. I made a mistake. I'll stick with it, finish what I've begun. No, absolutely not. It's time to get out of there and go back to doing what I could do. When I went back to the warehouse that I logged 13 years at, like I said, I had sciatic nerve pinches. So I'd be picking orders. And these are small items that we could carry in our arms. Didn't have to drive around a pallet jack. Sometimes my leg would give out because it was nerve pinch. My leg wouldn't work and I'd fall over. I catch myself and pick myself back up, but that would happen a lot. And eventually got some, a few years later, some therapy, some PT, and I had crooked parts of my spine. And I learned how to, do exercises, help realign my spine. But I never fully recovered. I still got sciatic nerve pinch, but the inflammation's not as bad now, so it doesn't happen as often. I'm not meant for hard physical labor, but that's what I've done most of my life, and it's a mistake. Now, I'm enduring it. I have endured it, let me put it that way. And, I go out and mow lawns, which is hard on my body. It really is. I'm not meant for that sort of thing. And so, what's lawn mowing? What's the big deal? Well, if you're frail and you're busted, then it's bad for you. I just wanted to illustrate, my life was full of malinvestment. Now, my people who knew me when I was younger probably said, oh, you should have gone to college. You were good at academics. You get your degree. You go just, truck through the bullshit of college, and college is mostly bullshit. And then you can get the degree, and then you get the entry-level developer position, and blah, 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 blah. And no, I wasn't interested in that. I talked about that during my sales trip video. It seems to me almost every choice I've had, it's been an opportunity for malinvestment. And I'm not complaining about that. I'm not complaining about that at all. My situation is probably atypical. But I hope I've illustrated at least sufficiently for people with an ear to hear that just finishing what you begin isn't necessarily a good thing. Often you're going to throw good money after bad. You're going to spend good time after bad. You're going to malinvest and get nothing out of it. And I do appreciate that some people who aren't particularly sensitive to the return on their investment often may end up sticking with something until there is some kind of return. If I was someone else, maybe I would have just kept grinding away at picking those locks until just one day, 3,000 or 4,000 hours into it, I got it. I finally can pick locks. Yay. Or I can just invest a few hundred hours in some other activity and get good at it. A few hundred hours in some other activity and get good at it. And by the time 4,000 hours of investment's gone, I'm good at all kinds of things. Strange how the world works. And now I'm here, I take care of a disabled person part-time, and I mow grass part-time, and I do karaoke part-time, and I raise these quail all the time. And I love them, even though they're little pains in the asses. That's all I gotta say. Don't malinvest. If you do, well, it's not too late to change course. Have a nice day.